to the energy talk from Citizens Advice. I'm pleased to welcome George from North and West Kent Citizens Advice to give us a presentation today. And the way we're going to do this is George is going to do the presentation, and then at the end we'll do some questions and answers. Now, just to sort of set the scene for this, West Kent has been concerned for some time about the cost of living, and we've been looking at different ways that we can support our residents. We've got a campaign at the moment called Help for You, where we're trying to kind of get lots of information out to residents so that people can access all the different types of support that are available. And the Citizens Advice are experts in this area, and they will provide information about the types of support that are available for people, and also in terms of financial support, and also some tips on energy use. So without further ado, I'm really pleased to hand over now to George from North and West Kent Citizens Advice.
Well, thank you, Kevin, and hi everyone, and thank you for having me. And so my name's George. I work for Citizens Advice in North and West Kent, so we're the Citizens Advice office that covers the areas of Dartford, Gravesham, Sevenoaks, Tunbridge, and Tunbridge Wells. I work. Well, my official job title is a project officer, but I work primarily on our energy projects here, where we try to help people with energy advice. So I'll just be going through this talk today. So just to let you know what we're going to be covering. Firstly, I'll just speak a little bit about what's going on with energy prices at the moment, and sort of why things are the way they are, and what we're sort of what we think we're going to be seeing in the next few months. Then I'll talk a little bit about the cost of living assistance that's available to help people in certain circumstances. And also the hopefully useful energy grants and the services that are offered by the energy companies as well. I'll then just go through some tips for saving money on energy bills, which will hopefully be useful, and then finish off by just talking about the energy services we provide at Citizens Advice in North and West Kent, in case there's any sort of anyone wants to come back to us about anything or discuss anything, one-to-one rather than in the group. And then, of course, we'll stop for a question and answer session. So just to start off with, let's just talk about what's going on with energy prices at the moment. As I'm sure everybody here will have noticed, we are currently in a situation where energy prices are very high. I think the highest they've ever been, really. At the moment, in fact, the price cap, which caps how high an energy company can raise prices, is actually so high that there's another sort of kind of pseudo price cap below it called the energy price guarantee, which is reducing bills even further. For the average household, and I think that's about 3 people, with the current energy price guarantee, which is capping the price you pay per unit of energy, the current average amount that an average household would be spending would be about 2,500 a year. And of course, if you live by yourself or if you live as a couple, the average amount would probably be lower. One thing I should just mention in regards to that is that it is the amount you pay per unit of energy that's capped, not the amount you pay per year. Just to clear up any sort of confusion about that, obviously if your usage is still high, then you will pay, the likelihood is you will pay more. There's been some recent news about the energy price guarantee in the budget that came out a week or two ago. So initially it was going to be reviewed in April, and that review was likely to be lifted as a result of that review. However, recently what's happened is that the government's decided to push that review back to July 2023, rather than April 2023. And that means that the current energy price guarantee that's there should continue until then. And this is something which isn't certain yet, so I don't want to say this is definitely going to happen. But we're hopeful that by the time that the energy price guarantee is reviewed, that prices would have come down sufficiently so that there isn't a big increase. And one thing which I'll sort of speak a bit more to in a moment is so at the moment, um, wholesale energy prices have actually lowered by quite a bit. Um, Energy companies have to buy their energy 6 months in advance at the moment, so we're not seeing those lower prices actually filtering through to consumers. Um, but we're obviously, what we are expecting as the months roll on is that those lower prices will start to filter through. So we're hopeful that yeah, when the energy price guarantee is reviewed again, that it will actually not increase by too much or even decrease, hopefully. Um, Now, one thing that well, back a couple of years ago, we used to talk about at the start of all our talks was whether it was worth switching supplier and what the best thing to do there was. I mean, certainly for the last year and a half or so, the cheapest tariff on the market has actually been the default tariff, which is a standard variable rate. Variable means it changes depending on what happens in the market, as opposed to fixed rate tariffs where you basically sign up for a tariff that stays at the same price per unit of energy for a fixed period of time. At the moment, there are virtually no fixed rate tariffs on the market, um, and as a result, the default standard variable tariff is the cheapest one, and it's effectively, in a way, being fixed because every energy company is pushing up their variable tariff right up to the price to the energy price guarantee, so they're having as high as they can, and effectively that means it's all sort of much of a muchness, regardless of which energy company you're with. Um, we are hopeful that will change over the next few months. So it does appear that certain companies are beginning to sort of prepare to offer cheaper fixed rate tariffs. I mean, I know that on news the other day, I think OVO were saying that would be something that they are going to release. And I'd expect other companies to follow suit. What we would say is that those first few fixed rate tariffs that are released are probably going to be less expensive than the standard variable tariff now, but probably more expensive than what the price cap or the energy price guarantee will be in a few months' time. So it might be worth just to sort of hold your fire on switching to a fixed rate tariff immediately. But as more companies start to release more tariffs and as the price goes down, and as there's more competition in the market, that should hopefully take us back to a place that we were, a few years ago, where it was actually possible to really make good savings through switching. So that's something to keep an eye on. In the meantime, that there is a lot of help available for people. Well, a fair amount of help available for people, given the current cost of living situation. I'll just start off with something which actually is about to finish, given that we're 31st of March today, which is the Energy Bill Support Scheme. So these were payments that were paid out to every household in the UK between October 2022 and March 2023. So there's a total of £400 split into six instalments, 6 monthly instalments of about £66 or £67 each. Now that should have been something that's been received. Of course, if it's something that you haven't received, we'd suggest contacting your energy supplier, or if you'd like our help looking into it, talking to us, and we can help you contact your energy supplier if necessary. One thing I also want to mention, although I don't think it's necessarily relevant here, so I mean, so this would have been paid out with to people's electricity accounts. So I don't think it'd be particularly this would be particularly relevant to people in Strawberry Hill, who people we're talking to today, who do all have their own supplies. But for people who don't have a direct electricity supplier, such as those living in care homes or in this case West Kent housing schemes, as we understand it, you should be able to apply for the full £400 and still receive that. There's that can be applied for either online or over the phone. And that's through something called the Energy Bill Support Scheme Alternative Funding Scheme. So again, if you want any assistance with that, or anything like that, you're very welcome to speak to us. Then additionally, I mean, I don't think this is something that would be particularly relevant to the residents of Strawberry Hill. There is something called the alternative fuel payment, and this is just a payment that's paid out to anybody who has sort of a non-electric or non-gas source of heating. But I know that's not relevant for today's audience, so I'll just run past that. And then, so I just want to talk briefly about the cost of living payments that are available. So last year, these were paid out and they're being continued this year. So firstly, the cost of living payments, which is for people on means-tested benefits, so anything like pension credit, universal credits, or any sort of the legacy benefits. So that's a £900 overall, a £900 payment over the course of the year, which is going to be split into 3 instalments, with one to be paid out in the spring. So we think probably April, one in the autumn, and one in the winter, of roughly about £300 each. Those are all being paid out automatically as well, so there's no need to apply or do anything like that. And then for anybody over state pension age, there's a pension and cost of living payment. So as I said, this is everybody who will have reached state pension age by the 25th of September 2023. It's a £300 payment. It was paid out last year with a winter fuel payment, and it's going to be paid out again this year with the winter fuel payment. So that's worth looking out for. It's £300 per household, and again, it's all being done automatically, so no need to apply. And then finally, for people who have a long-term health condition or a disability and receive some form of disability benefits such as PIP or attendance allowance or disability living allowance, there's going to be the disability cost of living payment, which again was paid out last year. It's continuing at £150, and that's going to be paid out at some point in the summer. So worth looking out for that, and hopefully that'll be useful. Then on to what the energy companies can do. So firstly, this is something which, I mean, if you haven't received it for this year, you probably won't receive it at this point, but I do just want to mention it. It's the Warm Home Discount Scheme, and this gives people who are eligible a £150 discount on their annual electricity bills, and is administered by the energy companies. So it can be received automatically by anybody who receives the guaranteed element of pension credits, or you can also receive it, but you have to, number one, you have to be receiving a means-tested benefit or the savings element of pension credits. And it also depends on the size and the age of your property. So, I mean, in reality, we are finding that a lot of people who have received it in the past aren't getting it this year, because it's a bit more complicated in terms of who's eligible, which is a bit of a shame. And again, that's all being done automatically, so no need to apply. You either receive it or you don't. As I said before, I think if you haven't received it at this point, the chances are unlikely that you'll be getting this. But hopefully they'll maybe change the eligibility criteria next year to make sure more people receive it. And then I also want to talk about the Priority Services Register, which is a very useful scheme. It doesn't offer anything financial, but does offer a number of useful services. For example, those services would be if there's a power cut, your property would be a priority property to get power back. Well, this probably isn't relevant to West Kent housing tenants, because I think West Kent will probably sort this out themselves, but you can get free annual gas appliance safety checks if you live in a household with a low income. Other than that, there's also the pass-through protection scheme. So if your electricity supplier needs to send anybody around to the property to do any maintenance work, they would have to state a pre-agreed password, and that way you would know that they were legitimate. And then the other one, which is other service which is very useful, is sort of making what we describe as appropriate alterations in terms of correspondence and billing for people who are hearing impaired or sight impaired. So that's really useful and really important. Now, it's available to anybody who has a long-term health condition or a disability, or if you're over state pension age, or if you live with a dependent child under the age of 5. Different energy companies have other eligibility criteria as well. So, for example, carers with some energy companies can be eligible. But if you do want to be placed on it, it's just a case of, well, it should just be a case of simply calling up your energy company. I know calling up energy companies at the moment isn't particularly simple. But if you can get through, just asking to be placed on the priority services register. Alternatively, if you're online, a lot of energy companies sort of let you sign up via their websites. Yeah, so it's they're relatively happy to put people on it. So it's not like you have to jump through a load of hoops as well. It's just to help the energy companies to be aware of anything that might be relevant. And then I also just want to talk briefly about smart meters, which we usually get a lot of questions about. Smart meters are basically devices that effectively are split into two parts. So there's a smart meter itself, and then there's the in-home display. The smart meter itself is something that goes on your meter. And if you have a credit meter, it can send your meter readings to your supplier automatically. That's a big benefit of it. So no more estimated bills, no more having to worry about sending in meter readings. If you're on a prepayment meter, obviously that's not quite as important. But the big benefit, if you're on a prepayment meter, is that you're able to top up via your phone rather than having to go to a post office or a PayPoint or a PayZone. And it just means you can top up at any time. So that can be really useful. As I mentioned, smart meters come with these little sort of computer screens called in-home displays. They're small monitors that we don't have to use them, but you can use them, and they show you your usage in close to real time. That can be really sort of useful just to know what's pushing up your energy costs, and it can help you avoid wasted energy. As I said, some people really like these, other people really aren't keen at all. You don't have to use them. You can still have a smart meter; it can still work fine. Obviously, it is there if you want to use it. And then just onto some sort of tips for saving money on energy bills. These might be things that sort of everybody who's listening to this already does, but we always just go through them just in case there's anything that could be useful to know about. And of course, this isn't an exhaustive list. There are other things as well. These are just sort of a number of things we've picked out that could be useful to be aware of. With the first one being that one way to cut a little bit of money out of your energy bills straight away is not to leave appliances on standby mode. Obviously, one appliance here and there doesn't make a big difference, but a lot of people tend to do it with a lot of appliances. Appliances on standby mode amount to about 8% of an average electricity bill. So if you are able to avoid having them on standby, that can build up and help you save money on your electricity costs. Additionally, we suggest switching your light bulbs to energy-saving LED light bulbs, and that change can be made gradually as light bulbs sort of run out. We suggest switching off lights in rooms you're not using, which I mean, certainly I'm forgetful and I tend to leave lights on, but if you are able to do it, again, it's a good way to save money without really having to do a great deal. And then in terms of sort of things that you can do around the kitchen, for example, so we suggest not overfilling the kettle, just using the water that you need, because it requires less electricity to boil just the water you need rather than filling up the kettle completely. If possible, we suggest using a slow cooker if you have one. They're the most energy efficient type of cooker. Obviously, it takes a bit longer, but if you have the time, it can save you a bit of money. It all sort of adds up. And also, when you are using a cooker for cooking, we obviously this is a tempting thing, and I do it myself, and it's completely understandable to take a look and see how it's cooking, and if it looks like it's almost done, or if it's still way off. But when you open an oven door, 25% of the heat from the oven is lost. And then, of course, when you close it, then the oven has to heat up again. We would suggest, if you can avoid doing that, that's another way to save a bit of money here and there, as well as defrosting fridges and freezers. So it's worth keeping. Basically, if fridges and freezers are free of frost, it will improve their energy efficiency, which will save a bit of money as well, especially since they're on all the time, basically. Additionally, dishwashers, washing machines, and tumble dryers, these are the three big sort of really costly electrical appliances that a lot of people have. So we do suggest only running dishwashers when full, if possible, because it could lead to using dishwasher less, and that will save money on both water and electricity. Same thing with washing machines and tumble dryers. If you're able to only run them when they're full, it will save money on water and electricity. Although we do suggest as well not overfilling washing machines, because that can lead to clothing not being washed sufficiently, and then of course you have to do another wash anyway. So that's something to consider there. And we would suggest doing laundry with a 30-degree wash. That's the most energy efficient sort of wash setting that you can use. And if you are using a tumble dryer as well, something that I tend to do is to not necessarily take the clothes out as soon as they're dry. You sort of let it kind of run around for a while. We do actually suggest, even though obviously those cycles help remove creasing, we do suggest removing clothes from tumble dryers as soon as they're dry. And yeah, that just means that you won't have the electricity being used by those extra sort of spin cycles. And as well, not just from a sort of an energy perspective, but from a fire safety perspective, always worth cleaning the filters, just to make sure that they're free from any fluff or lint or anything like that. And if you've got communal laundries, which I'm aware some West Kent properties do, so one thing that could be a sort of something to try, if you've got somebody who you trust and you're happy to share your laundry with. If you find that you're not filling up the washing machine or tumble dryer when you're doing your laundry, maybe worth combining it with a friend. And if everybody was to do that, then the the overall cost of it would reduce. Additionally, we do suggest switching off electric towel rails if possible. Those tend to use quite a lot of electricity, and although they're nice, it is a way to save some money there. The only thing would be if they double as radiators, then we do suggest not doing that. Then just in terms of the heating of the property, so if you have a thermostat in your property and you find that the property's at a comfortable temperature, we would recommend in the colder months. Obviously, hopefully we're going into the warmer months now, so this won't be such as much of an issue. But certainly in the colder months, if you find that the property's very warm and you're comfortable with it, maybe just try seeing what it's like if turning down the thermostat by a degree or two. And if you're still comfortable, that can help you save money. So you can save around £60 a year by doing that. However, one thing we do suggest is not having the property at a temperature below 17 degrees, because that can risk causing health issues. Well, I mean, it's less important. It can lead to damp and mold, but I know West Kent have their own policies about that, so I won't go too much into that. Finally, we would suggest as well, I mean, this is something that's might seem quite obvious to some people, but we would suggest not having furniture directly in front of radiators. Obviously, if the radiator's on and there's a sofa in front of it, the sofa will absorb most of the heat. Whereas if there's nothing in front of it, the warm air will be able to flow more easily and sort of properly heat up the room. So those are our tips. And if you'd like to sort of gain a greater understanding of the cost of your usage of your electricity appliances, we do have our own electrical appliance usage calculator, which is on our website at the link there. So maybe worth having a look at that. It's always quite interesting to see what comes up. Good. So just to finish off, just to talk about our services at SINS Advice in North and West Kent. So we offer free one-to-one specialist energy advice services, advice sessions, either with myself or one of my colleagues. And if you have an energy issue that you want to discuss, but maybe you don't want to discuss it in front of everyone, you're welcome to get in touch with us. We have our advice line number where you can get through, and they can refer you on to us if necessary. Alternatively, we can also be contacted by emails, so that's the best way to contact us directly. So that's the email address to send us an email on if you'd like, if you use the internet. Additionally, this I won't spend very long on this because I think West Kent do supply these for all their tenants, so it's not particularly relevant. But if you have any friends who need a free carbon monoxide detector, we can also help out with those through our carbon monoxide project, where we try to raise awareness of the risks of carbon monoxide leaks. But thank you very much for listening, and yes, I guess we'll move on to the Q&A.